On the biggest stage in the world, FanDuel is changing the game because sometimes your player gets subbed off and your bet goes with them. Not anymore. With FanDuel Super Sub, if your player's subbed out, your bet stays in. That's right. If your player leaves a match, your bet continues on with the substitute. So you're still in it until the final whistle. Visit FanDuel.com. Get started now. Let there be goals this summer on FanDuel.
21 plus select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino. 18 plus DCKYWY. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 1-800-MY-RESET. 888-789-7777. Visit ccpg.org/chat. Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org. Maryland. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org. Call 800-327-5050. Massachusetts. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY. Text HOPE-NY in New York. Call 877-770-7867. Louisiana.
Visit FanDuel.com. Get started now. Let there be goals this summer on FanDuel.
One crunchy bite of a Hershey's cookies and cream bar, and I'm taken right back to college move-in day. I was a little overwhelmed by the newness of it all. Boxes were everywhere. I needed a break from unpacking. But just as I was able to take a breath and open my Hershey's cookies and cream bar, my new roommate Rachel walked in. I offered her a piece, but she said no. Then after a beat, she said, "Actually, those are my favorite ones." We laughed. The ice was broken, and we've been friends ever since.
Hershey's. It's your happy place.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg,
Essayist and commentator Eric Levine,
and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party, as well as the County Chair of the Republican Party out on Suffolk, Long Island. With us is our good friend, co-host, noted attorney, commentator, essayist, Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg, and we welcome back to Let the Record Show another good friend, Joel Rayburn, who's a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, a diplomat, a scholar, an expert on Middle Eastern affairs. Joel, welcome back to the show. We're happy to have you.
Glad to be here.
So, as Eric and I walked into the studio, there was some breaking news that Trump has announced that he stopped the attacks on Iran, and he expects a signing of an agreement very shortly. That's the breaking news. So I want to open this up by saying I want to reiterate my concerns and my skepticism about a deal with Iran. It's very simple. These people are hegemonic, they're zealots, they're a death cult. They're dedicated to the destruction of the state of Israel, Western civilization, and, of course, the United States of America. My view has always been, as long as this regime stays in place, any deal, by definition, is a bad deal because they'll just regroup and come back at us. And they've been funding these terrorist groups, whether it's the Houthis, whether it's Hamas, or it's Hezbollah, or other fringe Islamist groups have waged war against Israel and their neighbors, fellow Muslim neighbors in the Middle East. This is very serious business. So if there is going to be a deal, we have to look at it very, very closely. At the very minimum, we have to make sure that any of the nuclear weapons and their nuclear so-called dust is removed, that the capacity to build drones, ballistic missiles is stopped, that they don't wage war through these proxies, and we don't fund these proxies, that we have some degree of stability in the Middle East. And let's not forget, if we cut a deal with these people, you have to trust but verify. And if you can verify, which I'm very skeptical about, you have a real problem. You cannot trust these people. They will be back at us. And they suppress their own people. And frankly, when Trump said back in April, help and hope is on its way, keep up the fight, I think he's selling out the Iranian people as well as his neighbors in the Middle East. I'm very unhappy about this news. The one piece of good news I'm happy about is there's a report that Jay Clayton, the former chairman of the Security and Exchange Commission, the United States Attorney for Southern District of New York, a great lawyer, good friend. Jay has been nominated to be the head of national intelligence, which I think is an excellent choice because Jay is really one of the most first-rate public servants you can have. At this point, I'll turn you over to Eric.
So, Joel, thank you. Welcome to the show. I share much of Richard's concerns. First, let's start with what you've heard about what, if anything, is contained in this deal, and then we can talk about some of the specific concerns or issues that arise from it.
Sure, Eric. Well, I think still probably a long way to go to get to the kind of deal that would be acceptable to the president and to U.S. interests, let alone allied interests like Israel's interests and so on. So I think I always endorse the president's optimism. I do think there's a lot of hurdles to be gotten over. But the fact we learned a couple of things over the last 24 hours that I think were really important to getting to the point. Whether let's say the object is to neutralize the Iranian regime's ability to do harm to the region around it, to our interests, to international security, and whether that can be secured in a deal or whether it has to be done just by military capitulation and so on. I think that's just instrumentality. That's not the end goal. So we learned a couple of things, I think, over the last 24 hours about what tools the president is willing to use to try to get to that end goal of eliminating the Iranians or neutralizing them as a threat. The first one is he showed very importantly going to return to force, and on a broad scale. Of course, Central Command had been using force, but it was just proportionate responses to attacks on us, self-defense type of attacks from the Iranians themselves. Last night was the first time that the U.S. that he instructed the U.S. military to go beyond that. And I think that dispelled a mistaken assumption that the Iranian regime had, that he wasn't willing to return to the use of force. So he's reestablished some of the credibility as a threat of force. Beyond that, a very important thing that we learned was that Project Freedom, the idea of opening up a separate channel through the Strait of Hormuz in order to get some vessels in and out, actually didn't shut down. It did continue in a clandestine way, and that there's actually been some volume of crude oil and some LNG, for example, that's been able to exit the Gulf. So that relieves the international economic pressure that the Iranians are able to wield. Those are two important factors. But I think what we haven't accounted for is that I think there's a hidden priority for the Iranians that is mismatched by the U.S. strategy here, the U.S. negotiating strategy here. Our priority is first and foremost the nuclear program, the nuclear material, and so on. Second, Strait of Hormuz, and then the proxies, Hezbollah in particular. It's almost like it's being treated in our conception as a side issue to be put off to the side, or that could be conceded or restrained in favor of going for these other two priorities, the nuclear program and the Strait. I think the Iranians see it exactly the opposite way. I think for the IRGC, Hezbollah is their priority. They're willing to risk going back to war. They're willing to risk economic collapse in the service of Hezbollah much more than in the nuclear materials. That's why I think actually our approach so far has risked conceding to them up front the thing that they want most, which is to preserve Hezbollah as a threat and as a model of the Islamic Revolution and so on. Anyway, that's the main reason why I think there are potentially rough times ahead for this deal making.
Yeah, so let's focus for a second on. I happen to think you're right that the IRGC and the regime are laser focused on saving Hezbollah. It is a concession the Israelis absolutely cannot make. It is an existential threat to their existence. To allow Hezbollah to continue to exist is to concede the northern border of Israel. It will become a no man's land. No state can survive in that state. So, if this deal does include a forced cessation of hostility, an imposed cessation of hostility of the United States on Israel to prevent it from destroying Hezbollah, one of my huge concerns is that's going to put the Israelis and us on a collision course, because I don't know how Israel can survive with if Hezbollah is allowed to continue to exist. That's the first thing. And the second thing is it relates to the Arabs. If I'm a Gulf Arab state, I can say this is a wonderful deal. It's great. It's fantastic. It will not last a single day, assuming the Iranians live up to their obligations, which I think we can all be confident they won't. But even assuming they do, if I'm MBS, if I'm Mohammed bin Salman, I say to myself, well, Trump will be here for 2.5 years, and then he's gone, and the regime will still be here. So we have to start making accommodations to the regime now.
So much for the Abraham Accords.
Yeah, exactly. So it's at a time when we really need them to be aligning with us, to be stalwarts against the Iranian regime and hoping to get them to join the Abraham Accords. Are my two concerns misplaced?
I don't think they're misplaced. I think there's a little more nuance to the issue of the Gulf states, the Arab states reaction, because I also think one thing that's quietly happened here is that they've come to believe, because the Iranian regime lashed out at them when the Arab states, were trying very hard to stay on the sidelines of this conflict. I think they've concluded in the Arab capitals that they can't live with the Iranian regime in the longer term. So they may have to hedge, they may have to accommodate in the immediate term to navigate the danger that the Iranians pose, but they are looking for ways, I think, to make themselves harder targets, like the Israelis have, like the Emiratis have started to do, and to align in a way that is against, that it opposes Iranian power. So I think that's what's happened. The Iranians are going to wind up regretting in the longer term if that regime survives. On Hezbollah, I think you are right. This is the rock on which the ship will founder if it's not done the right way, because the Iranians want that agreement to include a U.S. obligation to restrain Israel from pressuring Hezbollah in Lebanon, and that's not something that Israel is going to be able to live with, and it's not something that I think any U.S. administration is able to or has the interest in guaranteeing. So that is the single great, as I said before, I think that's the single greatest sticking point on trying to get to some sort of arrangement. I think the president can get to a deal to compel or cajole the Iranians to relieve their pressure, their military threat to the Strait of Hormuz. On the further elements of it, on the nuclear program, on Hezbollah, I think it's tough sledding. A long way to go.
Yeah, so coming back to Hezbollah for a second, it's important for listeners to understand this isn't a Bibi issue. Everybody loves to say this. It's all Netanyahu's fault. We don't hate Jews. We don't hate really. We do hate Zionists, but it's unseemly to say it. And we don't hate Israel. We just hate Bibi. It's important for everyone to understand there's not a single elected official in Israel across the political spectrum, whether you're liberal or you're most conservative, that will allow Hezbollah to continue to exist. To the extent that there's criticism of the way that within Israel of how Netanyahu's been prosecuting the war, it's generally because you're not doing it effectively enough. So regardless of who the prime minister is, there are going to be elections in Israel in October or September. Regardless of who wins that prime minister is going to want to destroy Hezbollah. And I just don't see how any Israeli government can survive more than a few minutes if they concede that Hezbollah can stay there. The Israelis made a terrible mistake by allowing them to take over the country in the first instance. They're not going to repeat that mistake. Remember, the Iranian strategy is this ring of fire. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Syrian Hezbollah also in Syria, which they tried to set up, and then in Iraq, and then you have the elements in Judea and Samaria, and Israel can't allow that to continue. So that's the first point. So I just don't see how that could possibly work. And then to your point, the Arabs have learned a lesson. Maybe the UAE has, but many of the other Arab countries, whether it's Kuwait or Qatar or Saudi Arabia, they have shown themselves to be pathetically weak. So I really, if we're putting our eggs in the basket that those Gulf states are going to stand up and defend themselves, call me skeptical. I mean, I don't know what your reaction is to that.
Well, on that point, look, I think actually the Gulf states have been doing quite a lot that's very quiet. I mean, the first thing is they've been facilitating U.S. and Israeli operations. I mean, U.S. in particular operations. The second thing is that they have from time to time been participating in those operations themselves, either from a support aspect or occasionally direct strike.
Beyond the UAE? I know the UAE has, but there's been other. Okay,
no,
good.
No. Yeah, beyond the UAE. And in addition to that, there is a brewing potential confrontation between the northern Gulf states, so Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain in particular, and the Iraqi militant groups that are under the Revolutionary Guard's direction. There have been so many drone and missile strikes against Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, potentially even Qatar, from Iraq, that it's gotten to the point where Saudi Arabia and others have quietly warned the U.S. and Iraqis that if it doesn't stop, that there will be strikes from some of the GCC countries against targets in Iraq. They're not going to tolerate it, and so that is a live issue. So I do think they've gotten. Again, if we go back to February, March, they had hoped to sit on the sidelines, and I think they've had a rude awakening, a wake-up call that they can't. No matter and there's no amount of going to Beijing and trying to enlist China as a guarantor that's going to prevent the threat from Iran against them, and an existential threat to boot.
So my last question would be, all right, so we've stopped now, and we hope to sign this deal. There's no the idea that the Iranians will sign any deal is, of course, is always a dubious proposition, but how many times can the U.S. military go through these fits and stops and remain at the ready at such high alert and still be effective? At some point, I have to think that in addition to the cost, financial cost, that it's going to undermine our readiness.
It also undermines our credibility by jumping back and forth and back and forth. And credibility is very important in the Middle East. It all has to do with the perception of who's the strong horse. Joel?
Respectfully, Your Honor, I don't think that that's the case about credibility.
Jesse.
I think the fact that what Joel had said about us going kinetic will immediately, I think, answer a lot of those questions. But I'll let him speak for himself. I just wanted to jump in there when you said that about credibility.
Well, we're going to jump to a break because Elias has given me the signal. We're going to have Joel Rayburn.
We're going to
give
Joel an opportunity to think about this.
That's right. We give him a few minutes. So Joel will be thinking. That's what he does at the Hudson Institute. He sits there and he thinks. Joel's a noted scholar, noted thinker, scholar, diplomat, and we're going to be back in a few moments with more important, interesting conversation. We're going to be leading off with Jesse Garcia with Mr. Rayburn. Please stay with us. We'll be right back with more interesting, important conversation.
Let the Record Show is on the air. Get ready, Staten Island.
The Ferry Hawks host the Hagerstown Flying Boxcars. Tonight at 7 p.m., it's soccer night, and kids glow around the bases postgame. Saturday at 6:30, it's Broadway night with postgame fireworks and Broadway rave. Sunday at 1:30, it's Military Appreciation Day, and the kids run around the bases.
A great day out for the entire family. Kids run the bases after every Sunday home game. Want the best seats all season? Get more Ferry Hawks for only $63. Visit ferryhawks.com now to lock in your seats.
Hey, I just Venmo'd you for rent.
Nice. Now I can instantly spend it whether I'm checking out online with Venmo or using a Venmo debit card.
Say more.
More exactly. Because the more you do with Venmo, the more you get. Like earning up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash on a bundle of brands.
So, order more pizza.
The math demands it.
Get the Venmo debit card.
Venmo Stash bundle terms and exclusions apply. See terms at venmo.me/stash terms. Venmo checkout not available at all merchants. Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A.
This episode is brought to you by Versed. Guys wear that guys wear. This Father's Day, Versed has something for dads who can activate vacation mode anytime, anywhere. The Versed Resort Collection. Versatile enough for a tropical getaway or a well-earned staycation. For dads who turn a grill into a buffet with the click of the tongs. A backyard into a water park with just a sprinkler. And are definitely not asleep on the couch. They're resting their eyes. Versed. Fit for dads. Only at Dick's.
At first, I didn't think it was real. I woke up to this blinding light, and I was transported to another place. Pluto TV. Then I heard a voice.
Come with me if you want to live.
There were thousands of movies and shows, and they were all free.
Truth is ours.
It's just so beautiful.
On Pluto TV, free streaming of Terminator 2, Fringe, Arrow, The 100, and The X-Files may cause excitement, loss of sleep, and sudden belief in extraterrestrials. No credit cards or alien encounters necessary. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg,
Essayist and commentator Eric Levine,
and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With us, staying with us for our second segment of today's show is Joel Rayburn of Hudson Institute, a noted scholar, diplomat, great thinker, an expert on the Middle East. So, Joel, if you will try to answer Eric's question, then we'll pick up with Jesse.
Yeah, I think so. The question was, how long can the U.S. military keep it up? Is it harming U.S. readiness and so on? Well, I think, look, the U.S. military has to keep it up because if the president is going to get to a resolution of this conflict on terms that are acceptable to us, he has to have that credible threat of the use of force.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So he can't hold the pressure off and expect to get his strategic objectives. That is where the Iranian regime, until last night, I think thought they were headed. They thought he was unwilling to go back to the use of force because of domestic political constraints or economic constraints here in the U.S. The Iranians can read Twitter. They can read the U.S. media here, and that's what they were hoping for. I think they had gotten into a situation where they believed time was on their side and that President Trump was going to be unwilling to come back and hit them before the midterms and so on. And he dispelled that, or he started to dispel it anyway last night. He has to keep the blockade in place. He has to keep the means in place, not just to force them to a deal that's acceptable to him, but then to enforce the implementation of it instead of what they normally do. So the U.S. military doesn't really have a choice but to stay on station for the time being.
Jesse.
Joel, thank you. It's great to have you again. And before we get into continuing on this question, I just want to go back to something we were talking about off air, about this alliance that you put together on the blue and orange with the Oklahoma Thunder, your favorite team, and the New York Knicks.
Yes.
Last night when we were taping this show, OG Onanabi made that incredible tip-in that gave the Knicks a 3-1 victory. And hopefully when this airs, we will be celebrating and planning a parade for new world champion New York Knicks down the Canyon of Heroes.
Absolutely.
So thank you for how you negotiated that alliance between the Thunder and the Knicks. It's probably the subject of another show, and we'll have you back after the NBA Finals. But just going back to what we were bringing up to you, what it seems to be, and I want to just speak to a couple of issues you brought up with Eric, is that some of the issues that have been clarified here in the last several days, when this airs, it'll be a couple of days, is that President Trump has definitely set forth that the use of full force is never off the table, and that that the Project Freedom was still in force, so maybe a little bit more clandestine, maybe less public than we were led to believe. But it also goes to the fact that whatever deal comes forward, and especially as it involves Israel's northern border, that whatever may be being said publicly between the two leaders, do you see that, or do you, from your experience and what your sources, that no deal is not going to move forward without Israel's understanding, acceptance in this deal, and especially with the fact that what we concluded in your last question, with the last Eric's last question, is that the use of American force and the presence of American force is it is the only insurance that whatever deal may be signed, and no deal could be signed by the time we get to this, because that's the way the Iranians operate, and we don't even know which group we're talking to or whatnot. But do we see that there's a lot more going on underneath, diplomatically, militarily, strategically, special forces to keep like the Strait of Hormuz open, Project Freedom going, and the fact that we are there as a forceful military to ensure whatever deal may or may not come?
Well, I'll add one thing. I'll add two things to your list, Jesse. The first is the president in his statement earlier today it indicated that he's willing to seize Karg Island, or he's willing to seize the Iranian oil production. That's the first time he's been that explicit about that threat. So this is another threat that he's putting on the table. In addition to that, we also heard from Secretary Scott Bessent this morning reiterating that which kind of gets lost from the headlines. Operation Economic Fury is continuing, and that the Iranians, the longer the Iranians keep up their confrontation with the United States, the more they're going to lose. They're going to deteriorate economically, and that's not a matter just of there's no concept behind that economic sanctions are going to make life difficult for the Iranian people, and then that's going to lead to some chain reaction. That's not the idea. The idea is severely disrupt the Iranian regime, especially the IRGC's cash flow that they require to prosecute the war and to pay for their security apparatus that keeps them in power. That's so. I think when you add those two things to sort of the toolbox, toolkit that you outlined, I think that tells you, yes, there's an awful lot going on. It's not just about the blockade. It's not just about the negotiation that's happening. There are these other lines of effort, these other lines of pressure that are very important to operate all together as a grand strategy.
But I do want to come back to one of the topics we were discussing a little bit earlier, that the Iranian mindset of when Trump leaves, assuming they make it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Do they just say to themselves that we don't have to outlive the United States? This is for the regime. We just have to outlive Trump. Because if there's a Democratic president, Kamala Harris will never enforce anything. Pete Buttigieg will never enforce anything. AOC will never enforce anything. So is potential Iranian strategy. Remember, John Kerry, during the first Trump administration, would literally publicly tell the Iranians, just wait out Trump. Help is on the way. Is that has to be in the back of their minds?
Well, I think you're right, and we lived through that movie one time before because in late 2020, we had the Iranian regime under severe economic pressure, very tight sanctions pressure that brought them really to the brink of collapse, to brink of bankruptcy and financial collapse, after which their regime would have collapsed. And they were just holding on for dear life, hoping that there would be a change of administration, and there was. And they gambled that there would be an immediate policy change with the new Biden administration, and they gambled right. And the sanctions pressure was relieved, and they were able to then they built out the axis of resistance even more with the sanctions relief windfall that led, in my view, directly to October 7th and October 8th. So yes, they will be looking to try to wait out President Trump. This is why I think the role of whoever's going to be the nominees for 2028 is very important, that they tackle this issue and be explicit about it in the campaign and be held to that. And in addition, that Congress has a role here. That Congress, if there's a consensus in Congress or a majority in Congress that's behind this kind of tough peace through strength policy vis-a-vis the Iranian regime, then that's what can make it sustainable, regardless of who's in the White House, or as sustainable as possible.
Yeah, but I don't see the Democrats.
I have no faith in Congress.
Yeah, well, I have less faith. I have less faith in the Democrats. I have less faith in the Democrats. Part of their policies now is to separate themselves from Israel.
Exactly.
So and they think the JCPOA still is the greatest thing since the British surrendered at the end of the revolution. So I don't see how that works. I don't see how that works. Well,
that's why, Jens, in my view, every congressional candidate who's going to be running in the 2026 and 2028 cycles should be put on the record. What is your policy? if you're going into Congress, do you support this pressure policy? Do you support the strategic objectives that are laid out by Epic Fury, Economic Fury, and this overall strategy, or not? And make them go on the record so that voters know what they're getting when it comes time to vote.
The war is currently very unpopular.
Well, for sure. Part of the problem, gentlemen, is this: the Straits of Hormuz were open. These guys led to the crisis in terms of maritime trade. They've learned a great lesson, which is they have real leverage because of physical geography and their ability to stymie maritime trade and have international economic results favorable to them. They've learned that lesson. They will not forget that lesson. They're a regime that's dedicated to the destruction of Western civilization. That's in their toolbox, and that's a real problem. That's my first point. My second point is I have no confidence at all in the ability of the American people to take long-term pain. It's not in their toolbox. It's not in their mindset. It's not what the American people
No, but we've
about.
shown during World War II we can do that. But
that was a different world.
But the public has to be prepared.
No,
the public has to be prepared.
Listen, Trump could do a much better job of messaging and narrative and explanation. There's no doubt about that. I agree with that. But I'm saying to you, this is a country that has an extreme left in the Democratic Party, which is isolationist, an extreme right in the Republican Party that's isolationist. You have people who are bitching and moaning and crying about the price of oil, not understanding that when people tell you they want to kill you, you should take them seriously. And whether oil costs a little bit more, doesn't cost a little bit more, the ability of these people to bring destruction to these shores, to our major cities, to our people, is enormous, and they have to fight back. And I don't have confidence in these people at all to really sustain pain. I have absolute confidence in the ability of the Iranian regime to sustain pain, particularly when there's other people doing the dying for them, like Hamas and the Houthis and Hezbollah. Joel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're in an uncomfortable situation where we have some real threats out there. We have an alliance of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and a few others, and I don't think the American people fully appreciate the danger of this alliance to our way of life, and people are fatigued with the global war on terror and with what they term forever wars, and they're in that kind of moment that we can naturally get into because we're protected by two oceans, where there's an inclination to disengage from the world and look at our own affairs. And what I think, for me, the lesson of the 20th century was that we have to care about what's happening on the other end of those oceans, and on who's in charge at the other end of those oceans and what their intentions are. And so if we forget that lesson right now, then we can expect to be in a very dangerous time.
Well, we don't teach that lesson anymore. So our young people don't even know this. Young people don't even know the 20th century occurred.
Jesse, final thoughts on this segment.
Just my final thoughts. Let's just go what you were speaking about. Do you think that when we were speaking that we need to address this through Congress and through the president? One of the problems we have, though, is that I know we all remember how we came together as a country. And when 9/11 happened, just about 25 years ago, almost 25 years ago, we don't see that same type of unity on issues like this because politics has become, especially on the left, so polarizing and one of, if not this, then that. Do you ever see a situation, whether it's this Iran deal or any type of conflicts or foreign challenges that we'll be facing in the future that does bring this country together, if not, ending a forever war? This is a war that's been going on for 47 years with Iran against the United States.
We didn't start the forever war.
Yeah,
the Iranians started it.
Well, I think the difference is that on 9/11, the homeland was directly attacked. Here on October 7th, the Iranians and the radical left have very effectively said, this isn't our war, this is Israel's war. This is the Jews' war. And that's why you see, I think, a lack of support for it. Yeah. And it has to be pushed back.
Yeah, the problem, of course,
the Jews are dying. Yeah. Israelis are dying for us in our war for Western civilization. But I think that's why. I don't know, Joe, if you have a different view.
And people have absolutely forgotten the incursion into our hemisphere of Iranian-supported countries, like Venezuela, like Cuba, and other communist states. They have infiltrated not only the United States of America here, but in our hemisphere as well, and they will regroup and try to do that again. So it's not like you have two big oceans, and I have doubt with the technology today that two big oceans are going to be worth a damn over the years as they enhance the ability of ballistic missiles to hit.
Let's give Joel the last word.
Yeah, I think there's still a majority in Congress that would line up behind the idea that there needs to be a strong policy against the Iranian regime to curtail its ambitions, to neutralize it as a threat. They may or may not agree with the specific mode of that, whether that's an epic fury type of military force operation or it's economic pressure or it's diplomatic pressure. But I do think you still can get Congress to line up behind the strategic objective that the Iranian regime's a threat, can't be tolerated, they can't have a nuclear weapon, and that needs to be U.S. policy. And I think working with that kind of majority and locking it in is the only way to make President Trump's policy durable beyond his presidency.
But I think the Biden administration belies your statement, unfortunately.
Well, Joel, it's been a wonderful conversation with you. Troubling, but wonderful. I want to thank you on behalf of Chairman Garcia, Eric, and myself for being back with us again. As this unfolds, we'll reach out to you again to join us. Thank you for your analysis and your insight. And we'll be back in a few moments with our final segment of this week's Let the Record Show. Please stay with us for more important and interesting conversation. And once again, Joel Rayburn of the Hudson Institute, thank you for being our guest.
Yeah, you were great. Thank you so much, Joel.
Thanks, Joe.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
This is Let the Record Show.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
This episode is brought to you by Starbucks.
That is fire. Whoa, that's good. This might be the drink of the summer. Okay, I like this one too. I'm rocking with it, okay.
Try it for yourself. Starbucks Refreshers Concentrates are coming home. Find them in the coffee aisle and make it yours.
Hey, I like your new RAV4.
Thanks, yours too.
What does RAV stand for anyway?
To me, it's the Remarkably Advanced Vehicle.
Really? To me, it's the Runway Approved Vehicle for its amazing style.
What about Remarkably Adaptable Vehicle because of its versatile cargo space?
Or Really Admired Vehicle?
Oh, or Really Awesome Vehicle.
It really is the recreational activity vehicle. The stylish 2026 Toyota RAV4 Limited. What's your RAV4?
Looking to see what's happening around your home? Ring's Battery Doorbell helps you track packages and see who's at your door in real time. The Outdoor Cam Plus protects your yard at night with a wide field of view and clearer Retinal 2K video. Or upgrade to 4K cameras and doorbells with Retinal Vision for ultra-clear zoom and detail. Your door, your yard, your home. With Ring, it's protected. Shop cameras, doorbells, and more at ring.com now.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg,
essayist and commentator Eric Levine,
and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and County Chair of Suffolk County Party. With us is Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. And our first two segments, we're privileged to have Joel Rayburn, a noted scholar, diplomat from the Hudson Institute.
I always learn something when I associate myself with the Hudson Institute.
No,
it's terrific.
No, it's a great institute. It does really great work, and they have great minds working there, like Rayburn. He's just phenomenal. So, gentlemen, this is what I want to raise the issue about. And I think the more we get to the midterms in November, the more I'm going to be deeply concerned about this. I respectfully submit that the Democratic Party has really lost its soul and his moral compass to socialists and Islamists. I think this is deeply troubling and frighteningly in terms of the threat internally, and, by the way, supported by foreign money as well. Look, you have a candidate in Maine, just got the Democratic nomination, Graham Plattner. This man is a failure and a basket case on every realistic objective.
He's a cretin. He's
Cretin?
a cretin.
Cretin. Cretin? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Tomato, potato, potato.
Thank you. What he is, he really is a clear and present danger to the survival of this country. When you have people like this who are even considered for more than 3 seconds to be in the United States Senate, supposedly the great deliberative body of our country, and an important policymaker, and a check and a balance for extremism, it's supposed to be the common sense body. It's supposed to be the check against the extremist majority tyranny of the House of Representatives because of the way the Senate is structured and because of the ability to slow down or stop dangerous legislation or public policy. This guy knows nothing. He was recruited by a couple of radical extremists as a candidate, the same way they recruited AOC. He was not an organic candidate. He didn't rise from the ranks. He was recruited by people who had an agenda to elect an Islamist and a socialist, and they got their wish. They drove out the incumbent governor from the race, and now he has a race against Susan Collins, who in my mind is one of the best United States senators we have. She's smart. She's calm. She works in a bipartisan way. You can count on her to have an honest analysis of the issues, whether you agree with her or not agree with her. She's somebody who stands for the best of the United States Senate and the best of this country. Susan Collins should be reelected to the United States Senate from Maine by acclamation, but now she has a tough race against his character, Graham. Now, what has he done? He's had attacks against the Jewish community. He's had attacks against his fellow veterans, saying they should die because he didn't like the way they conducted themselves. He's had homophobic attacks. He says women should, in essence, lie back and stop complaining when they get raped. He supports the worst kind of extremist socialist and communist policies. Everybody knows about the SS tattoo on his chest, which he says, well, he didn't know what it was, and he's a liar. And anybody believes that he didn't know what that was, since he considers himself a history buff, is either a liar or a fool. They're accepting the worst, most reprehensible character in the world as a candidate for the United States Senate from one of the two great parties in America. This is just awful, just awful. Now, one more illustration, then I'll go to Eric and to Jesse. In the state of Michigan, you have a character named El Sayed. He's an Islamist. He's a socialist/communist. He believes in hanging around people who supported 9/11 as a legitimate attack against this country because the United States of America.
He's a Hezbollah supporter.
He's a supporter of Islamist terrorists. He is the worst of the worst of the worst. And yet, in a three-way race for the nomination of the Democratic Party in Michigan, it's an August primary, he has the support of a large amount of population. He
got the UAW endorsement.
Yeah, right. He has UAW, which is in the pocket of the extremists. So what do you have? You have a dangerous guy who could very well win the nomination because it's so-called two moderates in the Democratic Party will split that vote. And you have a hardcore group of Islamists and leftists who could get him across the finish line. Who's he running against? He's going to be running against Mike Rogers, former congressman, former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee.
Terrific guy, terrific candidate.
Former FBI agent, a wonderful guy, a common sense guy, a self-made man. He is exactly the people we want to have in the United States Senate. His expertise on national security, foreign policy, intelligence is absolutely essential to the protection and defense of this country. And these are the characters that they elect. And then one more illustration, and then I'll turn it over. The L.A. mayor's race. Now, you had this fellow Pratt, and you can say whatever you want about him. You know, he was an actor, so what's the big deal? He's running against a failed mayor, Bass, a leftist and a fool, and against a radical socialist who a councilwoman. So he loses all of a sudden when they come up with all these absentee ballots, which is a crime against democracy and freedom, because you can't allow these absentee ballots that come in and they don't know where they're coming from. And they do mail-outs, by the way, in the state of California. Catch this. Totally propped up and created by the Democratic legislature and Newsom, the governor, where they do unsolicited mailing of absentee ballots to homes. We don't know whether people are alive, dead, moved. And then you allow them to go around and harvest votes, and you have drop boxes. It's a system leaves all kinds of opportunities for corruption. And this is very troubling. The good news is that Steve Hilton is in the runoff against Becerra for governor, but the loss of Pratt is very troubling about the future of L.A., and if the future of L.A. is in problems, then you have to worry about the state of California, and you have to worry about America. Eric.
Yeah, so if you make all these points to Democrats or people that support Democrats, they say, you can't tar the entire party with the acts and statements of a few people. But here's the problem.
They are the entire party.
The Democratic Party is rallying around them. Look who's coming out in support of Graham Plattner. Bernie Sanders, of course, who owns the party. He's the intellectual, ideological father of the DSA and now the Democratic Party. Of course, Elizabeth Warren. But presidential candidates, Roy Khanna, and we all know Roy Khanna is going to run for president. He shows up in Maine standing with Graham Plattner, extolling the virtues of this Nazi communist woman hater who brags about pleasuring himself in porta potties. So it's not the individuals. These guys are the party. The party is rallying around them. You know, look at Zohran Mamdani. And does anybody come out, any Democrat of any heft, seniority, come out and speak out against them? Where the hell's Chuck Schumer? As I always say, Chuck, of course, is in the witness protection program.
Hakeem Jeffries.
Hakeem Jeffries endorsed Zohran Mamdani.
The man who would be Speaker of the
He
House.
endorsed Zohran. Kathy Hochul endorsed Zohran Mamdani. Now Zohran Mamdani is endorsing this woman, Chevalier, who's running against, how do you pronounce it? Espelot. Whose only crime, he's radical left, but he's committed the crime of supporting Israel and taking AIPAC money. So Mamdani is endorsed and supporting a woman who not only doesn't think that Israel has a right to exist, she's on the record as saying Israel does not exist, and that she thinks that America is, quote, effing disgusting. These are the candidates that they're supporting. Abu al-Said, I have not heard a single Democrat come out and condemn Said for publicly stating that he mourns the death of Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, that he supports Hezbollah's attacks on Israel. Have you heard a single Democrat come out and complain or condemn him? Of course not. No, you haven't, because the DSA is such a critically large portion of the Democratic Party's vote. They have convinced themselves that they must run to the left as far as they can to embrace the DSA's votes, rather than trying to track to the center and appeal to moderates and traditional Democrats. They are running to the extreme left, and that is why the DSA now owns the party. So this notion that Graham Plattner is a one-off, or Abu al-Said is a one-off, or Zohran Mamdani is a one-off, before you know it, every democratically elected official is a one-off. And that's really the danger here. The Democratic Party is so far to the left, it has no moral compass. Any party that can support or fail to condemn someone with an SS tattoo, a rape apologist who himself has assaulted women and is an avowed communist, if you can't speak out, and also, of course, he's engaged in a lot of these anti-Semitic tropes, that Susan Collins is owned by AIPAC, is owned by Bibi.
He said she's owned by the Jews.
Yeah, exactly. He's owned by the Jews. So I'm sorry. The Democratic Party has no moral compass, and they have no basis. It's interesting. They accuse Trump of being a Nazi, but their candidate's the guy with the Nazi tattoo.
Absolutely ridiculous. Jesse.
I agree with both you gentlemen. I mean, as I said when you were speaking, and I may have interrupted, and I apologize, but that is the Democratic Party. That's the Democratic Party we have here. I remember 10 years ago. 4 years ago. 6 years ago. I apologize. I'm getting my dates wrong.
Listen, I was never good at arithmetic either, Jesse. Don't this way.
The Democratic Party was concerned about Bernie Sanders becoming their nominee for president against Donald Trump in 2020. I remember that the Democratic Party was concerned about Bernie Sanders and his policies and such, the DSA's policies, being the nominee in 2016. And in both elections, they rigged the elections in the favor of their candidates, whether it be Clinton or whether it be Joe Biden. Now, it appears that those same elements are the ones that are running this party. It is the sense. We all agree with that. But here's what I'll say to you. In looking at these races, I know Mike Rogers, my Congressman Felix Scrucci, served and was elected in the first 107th Congress of Mike Rogers, is an outstanding public servant, an outstanding entrepreneur, and a great in law enforcement. I believe he's going to be successful. And Susan Collins, I believe, is actually facing a far better candidate against her than the governor than the governor of Maine that was pushed out of this race. So I believe that the same concerns that Democrats had in 2016 and 2020 are going to come home to roost. While the Democrats today, like, Schumer and all the leaders around there, they're rallying around these people because what they're dealing with is they are racing to the bottom. Democrats are racing right now to the bottom, and they're racing to the bottom of primaries. They want to maintain their own power and wage and to stave off any primaries against them or be successful in primaries on all sets. The issue here, though, is that when the electorate gets a Susan Collins or and a Plattner or whatever one of these Democrats on the far left in Michigan with Mike Rogers, that's going to be a different dynamic there. Will money come flowing in? Will George Soros, who's of the Democratic Party, come flowing in? Absolutely. But still, the appetite for this type of governance and these type of policies is not what exists especially with independent voters that have for the last 10, 15, and 16 years have been leaning more Republican because we are the party of common sense. And we talk about the hijacking of the Democratic Party by the DSA and now their attack on America. But it's on every set. And you have whatever kind of Democrat you want to classify him, Schumer, Jeffries, or a moderate. However they want to classify themselves that they're not DSAs, but they're all part of the same group. Number one, they have Trump derangement syndrome. Number two, their policies all are progressive economic policies that contribute to inflation. They ultimately harm the American working class and stifle growth. They are against border security to keep ours safe. They want to keep illegal immigrants here that have criminal records or mentally challenged and have mental problems and diseases here in America so that they can prey on our citizens. They certainly want to leave, and we're not learning a lesson by some of these people, the Democrats, because in Europe, we've seen a shift in the cultural stances of the European culture is almost gone. It's almost gone because of unchecked immigration in the EU and such. And certainly it's ideological differences. So what I say to you is that while these individuals pose a danger, and they pose an immediate danger to the United States, to our way of life, how we way of governance, I do believe and have trust in the American people and the American voters. The same voters that were going to reject the Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020 and force the Democrats to jerry-rig their election system, their primary system, are the same electorate that's going to say when they see a Mike Rogers and Susan Collins against these ultra-left DSA Democrats, I think that we're going to be successful.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope you're right, Jesse.
So am I.
I know. I know. I mean, I really hope, because we're really, when you talk about these issues, you're not talking about competing baseball teams or basketball teams. You're talking about the future of this country. And the sad thing is that, as Obama famously said, elections have consequences. When they beat Trump,
unless you're a Democrat, then you pack the Supreme Court. So
right,
you can,
right.
Exactly.
So that's the consequences. The consequences
Or change the election rules as we go along.
Exactly. Or get rid of the checks and balances in the United States Senate on the filibuster so they can push through every radical piece of legislation they want.
well, there are a lot of voices in the Republican Party now that are advocating for that.
I know, but I'm saying to you, but the Democrats want it because you know what the Democrats
Here's
will do
the
with
thing.
it.
It's coming. The problem is, there's political realities, and you got to be pragmatic. It is coming. The elimination of the filibuster is coming. The moment that the gavel is controlled by the Democrats in the U.S. Senate, the filibuster is gone.
Well, they have
And
to.
what
No,
does
they
that
have to
do?
control. They have to control the White House, the Senate, and the House. Otherwise, it's a waste of time.
Really?
Yeah. Well, if you get rid of the filibuster in the Senate and you don't control the House or the White House, it's meaningless.
You won't get the
You won't get the legislation through anyway.
Well,
this is true.
No, that's. But I think Jesse's concern is a real one.
No, it is. If the Democrats take over the White House, the Senate, and the House, yes, that's a real concern.
Okay. And you can take
But
the
Trump, even if they don't, the filibuster with right now, say in a split chamber, that one party controls just one of the two houses of Congress, still there is in the Senate a good deal that is still subject to the ultra fringe left of that party or the ultra fringe right of that party because of the filibuster, because you can't get to 60.
Yeah, but either the House, the Speaker won't bring it to the floor, so it won't go anywhere, or if it gets out of Congress, the president of the other party will veto it.
Look, I have to tell you something. I find it very troubling. Being a quasi student of history and political science, having read the Federalist Papers, having studied the Constitution, I'm very troubled by the impulses of the mob to do havoc and to trample the rights of their fellow citizens. I think you have to worry about that. That's what Madison was worried about. That's what the checks and balances, that's what the separation of powers was about. That's what federalism is about. That's why 3 co-equal branches is about. It's all about checking majority tyranny. That's the one premise of the Federalist Papers and Constitution of the United States that holds true 250 years after the Declaration of Independence. Majority tyranny is a great threat to this country internally. Gentlemen, another interesting show. Elias has given us the hook. Something that if he was
Elias is all-knowing and all-powerful.
And he's probably given the hook to the people in Philadelphia at the Constitutional Convention as well, way back then. So
probably.
I want to thank you both.
He's our Wizard of Oz.
He certainly is. So this has been another great show. Thank you for listening. And as always, God bless you, God bless your families, and God bless America. We look forward to being with you again next week on Let the Record Show. Thank you.